A man reaches out his hand just to keep it from falling. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't an enemy. He was just trying to help. He touches it for only a second, and before he even hits the ground, he's gone. This is the Ark of the Covenant, and if you think you already understand its story, you don't. Not yet. Now imagine standing inside the Holy of Holies. Absolute silence, no movement, no sound. Then suddenly a cloud begins to fill the room. Not smoke, not mist, something heavier, something alive with presence. The glory of God descends so intensely that even the priests cannot remain standing. They fall to the ground. And in the center of it all sits the Ark of the Covenant. Golden, unmoving, described as the throne of the living God itself. Inside it, the stone tablets, written, according to the text, by the finger of God. For centuries, this object stood as the most sacred reality in all of Israel. But then, history breaks. In 586 BC, the Babylonians destroy Solomon's temple. And when the dust finally settles, something doesn't make sense. The Ark is gone. No record, no explanation, no trace. It simply disappears. Before we even ask where it went, you have to understand what this object actually was, because this wasn't just a golden box. This wasn't some religious relic tucked behind layers of tradition. The Ark was described in far more intense terms, almost impossible ones. A throne, a presence, something that carried real weight beyond symbolism. When the Israelites crossed the Jordan River, the moment the priests carrying the Ark stepped into the water, everything stopped. The river didn't just slow down, it stood still, as if reality itself had paused. And an entire nation walked across on dry ground. At Jericho, they didn't fight like normal armies. They simply carried the Ark around the city for 7 days. And on the 7th day, the walls came crashing down. No swords, no siege, just the presence. Even their enemies treated it like something they couldn't fully understand. When the Philistines captured it, they thought they had taken a prize of war. But within days, a devastating plague spread through their cities. Tumors, fear, death. 7 months later, they sent it back, not as victory, but as desperate relief, as escape. And then there is Uzzah. In 2 Samuel 6, King David is bringing the Ark back to Jerusalem. Music is playing, people are dancing, pure celebration. The Ark is on a new cart pulled by oxen. Then, suddenly, the oxen stumble. The cart shakes. The Ark begins to tilt. A man reaches out his hand, Uzzah, just to steady it, just to stop it from falling. He touches it for a single second, and he dies right there. Not in battle, not after a warning, instantly, completely. The text says God's anger burned against Uzzah because of irreverence toward the holiness of the Ark. And whether we fully understand that moment or not, the point in the narrative is crystal clear. This was not something to be handled casually, even with the best intentions. It carried a level of holiness that didn't behave like anything else in the world. Most people think the Ark simply contained the 10 Commandments, and that's true, but it's not the whole picture. According to the biblical account, there were actually 3 things placed inside the Ark. First, the 2 stone tablets of the law, written by the very finger of God on Mount Sinai. These represented the covenant itself, God's binding agreement with his people. Second, Aaron's rod that had once budded. When the tribes questioned who God had chosen as high priest, each tribe placed a dead wooden staff before the Lord. By morning, one rod had come back to life, leaves, blossoms, even ripe almonds. From death to life in a single night. That rod was placed inside the ark as a testimony of divine authority. Third, a golden jar of manna, the bread from heaven that sustained an entire nation for 40 years in the wilderness. Daily provision, preserved as a permanent reminder that their survival itself had been a miracle. 3 objects, 3 testimonies. God's law, God's authority, God's provision, all sealed inside one chest. Now, over the centuries, many theories have tried to explain what happened next. Some say it was taken to Babylon. Others believe Jeremiah or the priests hid it in secret chambers beneath the Temple Mount. Some point to Egypt, others to Ethiopia. A few even claim it was destroyed in the chaos. But here, we're not chasing speculation. Let's stay with the biblical record itself. And when you do that, something becomes very strange. The Bible lists in careful detail what the Babylonians took from the temple: massive bronze pillars, the bronze sea, basins, shovels, bowls, gold, silver. Every category of sacred and functional object is recorded. Almost nothing is left unaccounted for. But the Ark of the Covenant? No mention, not taken, not destroyed, not recovered. Just absent. And that silence is what makes it so striking. The biblical writers are not careless. They document catastrophe with precision. Yet at the very center of Israel's greatest crisis, the holiest object in their entire system simply disappears from the record without a single word of explanation. The last clear reference to the ark comes during the reign of King Josiah, one of Judah's final righteous kings. In 2 Chronicles 35, he gives this command to the Levites: "Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon built. You need not carry it on your shoulders anymore." Now pause here and think carefully. If the ark was already sitting in its place inside the temple, why would Josiah need to issue that instruction at all? This is the last recorded moment where the ark is clearly referenced as being moved or placed. After this, it simply vanishes from the story. Not long after, the Babylonian invasion begins. The walls of Jerusalem collapse, the temple is burned, treasures are carried off into exile. And still, no mention of the ark. The prophet Jeremiah lived through this destruction. He saw Jerusalem fall. He walked through the ruins. And in the middle of that collapse, he says something unexpected. He speaks of a future where the ark will no longer even be spoken about. A time will come when people will not say, "the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord." It will not be celebrated, not replaced, not rebuilt, not even missed in the way we might expect. A prophet standing at the edge of national death. And yet, the most sacred object in Israel's history is not treated as the center of their grief. That silence is not absence. It's a statement. When the people eventually return from Babylon and rebuild the temple, worship returns. The structure rises again. The rituals continue. But something is different this time. In the Holy of Holies, the Ark is not there. For centuries, the Second Temple stands. The high priest still enters once a year on Yom Kippur. The ritual goes on, but the space itself is empty. No Ark, no mercy seat, no physical throne in the center. And then in 70 AD, when the Romans destroy the Second Temple, they carry away the menorah, the table, the trumpets, items so important they're carved into the Arch of Titus in Rome. But the Ark of the Covenant is not among them, because according to the timeline, it had already been gone for over 6 centuries. And this is where the story shifts from history into deeper questions. The golden lid of the ark was called the Kaporet, the mercy seat. In almost every ancient culture, a throne had an image, a statue, a visible form of a god. But in Israel's Holy of Holies, there was nothing like that. No statue, no carved image, just 2 golden cherubim with wings stretched out, and between them, empty space, an unseen throne. The invisible God was said to dwell on an invisible throne, not contained, not represented, not limited by form. Even King Solomon understood this when he dedicated the temple. He prayed, "Will God really dwell on earth? Even the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house I have built?" A king standing inside the greatest structure he ever built, and his prayer is basically this: "God, I know you don't actually fit here." So the question comes back, what actually happened to the Ark of the Covenant? The honest answer is simple. The Bible does not tell us. Its final physical fate is never recorded. But maybe that silence itself is the point. Across history, every other culture tried to preserve their sacred objects. They built temples around them, museums. They went to war for them. They made physical things the center of divine meaning. But in the biblical narrative, the most sacred object on earth simply disappears. And the story continues anyway. Because maybe the story was never truly about the ark itself. It was always pointing somewhere else. A sign, a shadow, a vessel of meaning, not the final destination. The ark disappears from history because the presence it represented was never meant to live inside a box.